Well, you often find there are just rigs that you go back to time and time again, and this is certainly one for me. It's such an efficient hooker. I actually been messing about with this for well over a decade now, and it was only when I sort of brought this back for my spring campaign, or early winter and early spring campaign, where I've been catching loads and loads of fish almost exclusively on this rig, I realised how efficient it was. Now, the boys at Korda named it the Mechano Rig. I didn't name it. I didn't have any words for it. I didn't know what to call it at all. But they called it the Mechano Rig because back then, going back 2009, there was lots and lots of different components that I was using to effectively make this rig. But in this day and age now, a lot of tackle's been refined. I can use different components, and it means I can make it a bit more sleek than what it was. It was a bit cumbersome back in the day. But it catches absolutely loads of fish. It's very, very aggressive. And I think it was an apt time to go through the components to talk about why it's so effective and also how to tie it. So first off, let's look at why this is so effective. Well, if anyone's watched or observed carp in clear water, they can't fail to see that they really struggle with stiff components. So I love a stiff rig, the hinge stiff rig, but stiff rigs in general. And when they go into a carp's mouth, they sometimes lack the flexibility to move, so they can be a bit one-dimensional, whereas this rig, because it's broken in certain areas, we've got total flexibility, but we're still incorporating those stiff elements as well. And I find that watching carp, they find this really awkward to deal with. That's particularly this stiff component goes in, it doesn't want to come back out and come out backwards. It's almost, when it goes in the fish's mouth, it has to come out that way as well if it gets ejected. And where we've got a nice bit of movement on the bait as well, that aids flexibility, and also at the swivel end, it can twist and turn and find a hold. So just for that reason, that little section there is very, very awkward for the fish to deal with, in my experience. Now, moving down, we've got a nice counterweight here, and the counterweight, that job is to pull down for gravity. So as soon as that goes into the fish's mouth, that's pulling down straight away, and you've got what is in effect a huge liner rig here, because I've put a little crimp there, and that's just to hold everything in place. That's all it's doing. I've used rubber beads in the past, but they can slip, so a little crimp in there, just pinched on, that's all it is, just to allow that swivel, free rotation, 360 degrees, and allowing again that weight just to pull down on this section, so everything's aligned at the bottom of the fish's mouth. And just moving on to the boom section, now you can use various different components. I use the boom in like £30, nice and stiff, throws everything away, but I've used the IQ2 as well, again really good components there, and in this case I've actually crimped them on there and just left a little loop at the end just to go on to my sort of my hooking arrangement, the rig component if you like. This style would be sort of a helicopter style rig. So all in all, it's a very efficient hooker, and a very sharp hook just sort of completes it. You'll notice we've got a doubled up section here of, in this case it's 25 mouth trap, and what that enables me to do is to form and steam the rig in position in terms of that lovely sort of square if you like, but also it means I can change the hook in a flash, so I can be, it's very efficient. And also once you've tied up these rigs as well, you can reuse this over and over again, so it's really easy on the pocket as well, because you tie up 7 or 8 of these rigs, that'd be good for 2 or 3 years. So all you're changing over is the hook component, so it's very good from that aspect as well. So the rig draws inspiration, I suppose, from many rigs over the years. If you look at today's common rigs on the market, they have all drawing on this theme as well. There's a lot of people who have realised that extending this section of the hook section to making in essence a bigger hook catches you more fish. And I can think of many rigs on today's market that all draw on that theme. This is one I come up with, I say, in 2009, so well over a decade ago. But I knew that that section, that long section, getting the stiff and the flexibility was key. And all in all, it makes for a very efficient hooker, and one that has certainly put loads and loads of fish on the bank. So the rig, in fact, is quite easy to dye once you've done it a couple of times. So if we start off with the boom section, Nothing fancy there, it's just literally a boom section with, in this case I've got a couple of crimps, but you can tie Palomar knot style or leave a loop of your choice. But it must terminate in a little micro swivel, and these little micro swivels break at sort of 25, 30 pounds, so they're plenty big enough for, obviously, for fishing in the UK. And obviously they're very, very small and very particular for obviously the next component, which is going to be the sweeping shank, if you like, which is made up of mouth trap. So in order to fix the micro swivel onto the mouth trap, first thing you need to do is to cut off, I'd say, about 4 inches of mouth trap. 25 pound I find the nice and robust and can be manipulated in such a way where it stays and steams in the right position. So you take off a length of mouth trap, you then double it over and then pinch the end so it gives you your doubled up section effectively. Then what I find what's easiest to do then is to put a small or a large crimp onto the mouth trap and slide that up so it's right up out the way, and then you attach the little micro swivel. So you put your 2 tag ends through your micro swivel. That's then on the shank, if you like, and then after that you literally tie an overhand knot. Really simple. Overhand knot and pull it nice and tight, and I use a little puller tool and my teeth usually just to bed that knot really tight down so it's not going to move. And I've never had this knot move at all in all the years that I've been using it. So essentially once you've done that, you've got all the components there, and all you need to do now is to add a hook. And I use a little bait screw because I find it really efficient, but you can use whatever you want, whatever hooking arrangement style you like. I've always found that the outturned eyes, so your choddy style hooks, really lend itself well, which comes very apparent when you're trying to align this. So you put this on very much like a multi-rig, going through the hook eye, then lassoing a bait screw, and then over the lassoing the hook in total, so it gives you a nice little neat presentation. And then what I do then is pull this all down nice and tight to the eye, so bed it down to the eye, and what that will do is it gives you almost like the perfect little D. So this will give you a little D section, which you then pull up and slide it up the hook, so your hook will run nice, your hook bait will run nicely along the shank of the hook, away from the hook importantly, just gives you that little bit more flexibility. And that is essentially it. So very easy to put together. One thing worth noting is I've messed around with having a sweeping, like a withy style sort of rig where it sweeps round, but I've always found that having it nice and straight and then having the little crimp turned down so it's in line with the eye and the point, so it makes a massive liner the most efficient way by far. I always find that straight trajectory out of the hook going, so the shank's going straight and then the double up mouth trap's going straight so it terminates where the crimp is and then pointing down. Find that's the most efficient way, and it's always caught me lots more fish than otherwise. You know, if you do sweep it round, I find you get good hook holds, but I only do that if I'm using it as a pop-up rig, and you can use this as a pop-up rig as well. By simply manipulating it, you can turn it into a very aggressive withy style pool rig with a pop-up presentation. But essentially this is what I use for bottom baits and for wafters. I just find it's an aggressive rig that always catches me absolutely stacks of carp, and always well hooked dead center of the lip. So perfect rig for that, fishing over a big spread of boilies. It's certainly one I would not be without in my armoury.